Thank you for joining us in the Literature Club, where we talk about some interesting topics in literature. This is episode number 1 of the Literature Club. I'm Ross.
I'm Molly.
And I'm Salah.
And we will be your guides down these potentially dark and yet eye-opening topics. Everyone has a story that influences them and changes them for the entirety of their lives. This concept has been introduced to us as Touchstone Texts. These can be presented through books, graphic novels, movies, songs, poems,
or even video games.
The concept of touchstone text inspires introspection during and after the read. It is something that will really stick with you and help you make connections, or even just get you to ask new and different questions. We are each going to begin by presenting our individual truths of a touchstone text that has influenced our lives.
For me, that touchstone text was The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I don't even know what possessed me to read it, honestly. I was a senior in high school. I was into all kinds of weird stuff at the time. I still am, but I was watching Harold and Maude, and I wore high-waisted everything, and my prom date made a playlist with Arcade Fire on it. So, I was that kind of kid, and it was right up my alley. But I didn't realize just how up my alley it was until after I finished it. During reading it, I had made all these sticky notes with little quotes and notes and things to remember, which was really out of character for me. I had never done that before. I occasionally dog-eared pages and underlined things in books, but I'd never gone to the physical lengths I had gone to engage myself in the reading experience. I always get immersed in books, and I feel like every book leaves a little part behind in me, but not like this. I'd never read anything like this. It took me a long time to get through The Road, even though Cormac McCarthy has a simple way of writing. I would even compare it a little bit to Hemingway in the sense he doesn't really make punctuation a priority, and the dialogue is simple. But the details he adds are beautiful. Sometimes I read paragraphs 2 or 3 times just to make sure I'm able to fully visualize it. And this book is dark. It's been 5 years since I've read it. I should probably read it again soon, but I'd like to read all of his other books first before I do. Anyway, what I liked initially about this book is I hadn't read that many books that made such a clear commentary on the human condition like this at that point in my life. It's really a beautiful book because it takes place in a post-apocalyptic world, and it follows this father and son as they journey across the road. I don't remember or know where they were going, to be honest with you, but I had no concept of what it was like to be a parent before then. I only knew what it was like to be a kid. My favorite quote of all time is, "If he isn't the word of God, God never spoke." And I didn't really believe in God at the time I read that. Sometimes I don't know if I do now. But I know that if I ever had a son, I would want to get that tattooed after he's born because that's my favorite quote from my favorite book. And it would be about my favorite kid. Or my favorite person in the world, I guess. Because, I don't know, those are the kinds of things you see God in, right? Anyway, I didn't mean to go on and on about my favorite book. I could talk about The Road all day, though, but we're not trying to have a 24-hour podcast. But in short, a touchstone text is a text that shifts your way of thinking forever and is probably something you'd at least considered getting tattooed.
My personal truth of a touchstone text would have to be Mario Puzo's Fools Die. I was initially inspired to read his work after seeing how amazing a movie The Godfather was, which set me on the path of reading all of his books. I have since read every single one and loved them all with the exception of his first 2, which I attribute to him still discovering himself as an author. Fools Die was written in 1978 and captures 3 distinctly different worlds, from the gambling and shady casino world of Vegas to the classy, elitist, and hoity publishing/literature element of New York, and finally the glitzy and glamorous film industry of Hollywood. With internal conflicts being displayed so clearly in the first-person narrative, You're able to experience the whole gamut of feelings and emotions. The book is mostly told by Merlin, a writer, but it is also told by his friend Cully, a con man who has worked his way up in a Vegas casino. It almost feels like Mario Puzo's own autobiography, in that it centers around a writer who has to wear many hats to eventually become the celebrated and world-renowned author/screenwriter. I first read this book right out of high school and have read it 3 times now, and every time I feel that I come away with it with a deeper understanding of life and all of its subtle intricacies. I feel like I have developed a better understanding of humanity as a whole from this book. The first few pages have such a glorious hook that it makes it hard for someone to put the book down. I would feel that this book would be a great book for fresh graduates of high school, earlier even if it didn't have a pretty decent amount of profanity.
I took a different path in defining a touchstone text. I grew up around video games, especially RPG role-playing games. Most of these RPGs base their game on a long storyline and sequence of events, from kids' stories to massacres and heroic deeds. I was really absorbed in the RPG genre and got hooked up with 2 games that had 2 epic storylines, Final Fantasy VII on PlayStation 1 and the Warcraft series on PC. I will always remember those moments where Prince Arthas in Warcraft 3, in the PC game, who wants to save his people from the plague, but it was too late to save his people. They were already infected with the plague and he decided to burn his people. He burned the whole townspeople so he could contain the infection and didn't want to see his people turn into undead zombies and serve the demon lord. The wrath of the king and the high knights was unimaginable of what he did to his people. Arthas takes off and decides to punish the demons to the far north in the freezing lands. When he gets there, his knights were too afraid to go in the deadly frozen forest, so he burns the ship so no one returns until the demons are killed. Along the way, his knights die one by one. Arthas loses his path of righteousness and kills his friends and doesn't listen to their concerns about going further in the woods. He finds a cursed sword and he was warned not to take it or there will be dire consequences. He just wanted to punish and kill the demons, no matter what the consequences were. Then in the end, he becomes a servant of the demon Lich King. I liked how the story was told and how anger and vengeance could change a human's life for better or worse. In this case, it was the latter. Everything we do has consequences. Even if you were able to achieve your vengeance, you might have done greater damage than it would be without achieving vengeance. I have seen people change in real life because of their anger and who wanted to get back to the person they were in conflict with. The outcome wasn't pleasant at all. There was more regret than satisfaction. Such stories could be presented to young adults to show them that every action has its consequences and we have to take responsibility of what we decide to do, and some actions are irreversible. Once you take a step, you can't go back to what you once were.
Molly, I read The Road years ago, and you're absolutely right. It's so simply written, yet amazingly deep. Cormac McCarthy has a very dark way of looking at the world, but the thing that I really came away from this book with was that the darkness was contrasted so clearly by the light and innocence of the child, and the light that his father used to shield him from the darkness. I really dug these 2 quotes from The Road. "What's the bravest thing you ever did?" He spat in the road a bloody phlegm. "Getting up in the morning," he said. This really hits me at the truth of the matter, because the father is obviously dying and wants to get his son somewhere that he will be safe. So he has to get up every morning and push through. The other quote is, "You have to carry the fire." "I don't know how to." "Yes, you do." "Is the fire real?" "The fire?" "Yes, it is." "Where is it?" "I don't know where it is." "Yes, you do. It's inside you. It always was there. I can see it." The quote-unquote fire is the flame of humanity left alive inside their hearts. The metaphor gives them hope to keep walking and perhaps find others like themselves.
Ross, I liked the quotes you brought up. Those 2 are really good ones. I think that the "do you carry the fire" one is really important. It sort of embodies the theme. Cormac McCarthy books can be dark, and he will even take them to places that go beyond bleak. but he never leaves the reader without at least a twinge of optimism or a twinge of hope, and I feel like that is the most honest comment on humanity that he could make. People see some shit. We are all exposed to some heavy things, but if we manage to not let the flame burn out, that's all we can really ask for in life, right? The father explained it in terms that the son could understand. McCarthy explained it in terms we could all identify with, I think. First of all, I really want to read your Touchstone Text, Fools Die. I don't think that profanity would faze a Gen Yer like me. So to your comment at the end of your truth, I doubt that the profanity would affect younger kids than me either. I guess I don't think that should deter people from reading anything, but I also just swore like 2 minutes ago.
You sure did, didn't you? It really isn't that much of a deterrent, the profanity, because life has some quote-unquote shitty elements to it. But that's not what this book is solely about. It also has elements of love, and there's this phenomenal quote about love that I would like to share with y'all. Love is like the little red toy wagon you got for Christmas or your 6th birthday. It makes you deliriously happy and you just can't leave it alone. But sooner or later, the wheels come off, then you leave it in a corner and forget it. Falling in love is great. Being in love is a disaster. What's your take on that?
Well, I'm really attracted to honesty, and I'm really attracted to simplicity, especially when it comes to literature, so I love it. I think that is one of the main reasons why I really want to read this book. I feel like the author will just kind of give it to me straight, what he thinks, what he's experienced. But I really like this quote because there's a lot of truth to it. Your red flyer does get tossed aside when you outgrow it.
But it sure was something special when you first got it, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's something else about the quote. Like, there's another element to it that you can kind of extract from it. You really feel nostalgic about that wagon when you don't have it or use it anymore. You look back at it fondly. You don't look back at it necessarily and remember how it's in shambles. You remember how it was in the beginning and all the times you had with it. And that's beautiful. The simple things in life are the most beautiful. I feel like using a wagon to illustrate that is very relatable. Does Fools Die make a lot of astute observations about what it means to be alive that are easy for most people to relate to like this?
The book pretty much is completely about what it means to be alive in this world. The way the author portrays the main character's very strict moral code slowly eroding until he is able to justify some of the darker choices he makes in life. Then there is his portrayal of Cully, the Vegas scoundrel who will and has crossed any line to get where he wants, but eventually finds the unlikely ally of Merlin, who inspires him to become a better person by observing the wavering of Merlin's code.
And Salal, let's talk about your Touchstone Text. I like that you went a different direction than us and went with a video game. I think a broad interpretation of literature here is key because a story is a story. I can't add a whole lot of perspective on the video game aspect because I was kind of a Barbie Horse Adventures girl and that was my jam. And then later on I played The Sims, so those were really the only video games I played. But I liked the story and I felt like that was relatable in itself. And one thing you said about people changing in real life from wanting to get revenge or anger or whatever the case may be, I think that is a lesson that a lot of people learn, and that was a really cool thing that you said and a profound thing you mentioned in your truth.
I also really like the use of a video game as a touchstone text, because I grew up living those adventures and stories in video games. Some of the most in-depth and creative stories in my life have been told through video games. I also distinctly remember playing both Final Fantasy VII and the original Warcraft, and feel that they both left their mark on me and the way I interpret people and lessons.
I think it is really important to include video games as a touchstone text or a publishing material because people are spending billions each year to deliver a top-notch storyline incorporated with interactions which make the audience immersed into the story.
Some people connect more with video games or graphic novels or movies or different styles of storytelling, even poetry.
Exactly, you brought up a good point where people have different ways in learning things, perceiving and enjoying literature works. Some people are visual learners who would enjoy and appreciate more visual works and productions.
Like myself, even though I have been a reader for the bulk of my life, I feel that I actually learn better when presented in a visual manner, rather than the wall of text some people associate with books. I personally can remember sharply or have internalized most of the particulars of movies and games that I've watched or played, whereas I feel that I have a less sharp memory of the stories I got from books, or maybe it's more vague or hazy.
Good point there. Integrating two skills at once might actually make you remember events of a story or make certain feelings stick with you. Or at least that's how it works with some people.
So, okay, how you digest a story is not as important as the fact that it happens, I feel like. The story should be the part that you focus on and the part that moves you and changes you and shapes you as a person eternally. How it happens is kind of semantics, you know. That's not really the exact term I was grasping for, but I guess it works.
It sure does. Well, that's all the time we have. But if you like what you heard, hit the like and subscribe button, and we might be back for another thoughtful analysis of a literary element. In conclusion, we just want to give you, our listeners, another perspective to think about the literature that you come across in your life. And don't be afraid to pass on those touchstone texts to the people that surround you, if only to help them understand you as a person better.
And maybe give some thought to the stories that make you who you are. I feel like every book I've ever read shapes me in some way, but The Road is the pinnacle of touchstone text for me, truly. Everyone has a story they connect with, down to the core, whether it be a book, a song, a poem, a movie, a video game, what have you. We all have a touchstone text, and sharing them with others benefits us all.
Explore genres that you never encountered before. You might find your new favorite book among them. And don't forget to share how you felt and experienced while doing so. Thank you for listening.
You